The courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Eric stood at his table, holding my journal like it was evidence in a murder trial. My private thoughts, my raw feelings, my darkest moments, all bound in worn leather that he'd stolen from our bedroom drawer. "Your Honor," he said, voice dripping with false concern, "these writings prove my wife is unstable and unfit to manage our business." 50 pairs of eyes turned to me. The judge leaned forward. Eric's lawyer smirked. I felt my hand tremble against the cold wooden table. Then I stopped it. I pressed my palm flat and steady. Let him think he'd won. Let him believe I was broken. That's exactly what I needed him to think. Because while Eric performed for the courtroom, I already knew something he didn't. The journal he held wasn't my weakness. It was his confession. Every gaslighting comment, every manipulation, every cruel word he'd said, I'd documented it all. He just handed the judge my evidence. I smiled. Not big, just enough. Eric noticed and faltered mid-sentence. My name is Lily Harper. Before I tell you how it all started, I have to ask you for a favor. Write in the comment where you're watching me from. Will love to see how far this voice travels, and please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your help is very important. What I'm about to share with you is something I never thought could happen to me. This is a story about trust betrayal, corporate revenge, and a woman who refused to break, and the kind of evil that hides behind a smile. My silence unnerved everyone, especially Eric. His lawyer kept glancing at me, waiting for tears or shouting or some dramatic breakdown that would support their narrative. I gave them nothing. Just sat there, hands folded, breathing steady. Ms. Harper, the judge asked. Do you have a response to these allegations? I looked at Eric. Really looked at him. This man I'd built a company with, shared a bed with, trusted with everything. He couldn't hold my gaze. Not yet, Your Honor, I said quietly. But I will. The judge nodded and called for a recess. As everyone filed out, Eric approached my table, confident swagger back in place. You should settle, he whispered. This doesn't have to get ugly. I gathered my papers slowly, deliberately. Eric, it's been ugly for 2 years. I'm just finally letting everyone else see it. His jaw tightened. Good. Let him wonder what I meant. Let him spend the recess trying to figure out what I knew. Because the Eric I married would never have anticipated this version of me. The one who documented everything. The one who planned. 2 years earlier, everything looked perfect from the outside. Vaughn Creative occupied the 10th floor of a downtown Chicago building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Our company was thriving. I'd just landed the Ashford account, a luxury hotel chain that would triple our revenue. The team celebrated with champagne in the conference room. To Lily's brilliant pitch, someone shouted. Glasses clinked. I felt proud, genuinely happy. Then Eric stepped forward with that smile I used to love. Actually, he said, voice carrying across the room, I think we should acknowledge that this was a team effort. Lily executed the pitch, but the strategy came from several brainstorming sessions. My smile froze. The strategy had been entirely mine. 3 months of research, competitor analysis, custom presentations. Eric had attended exactly 1 meeting and suggested we use more blue in the slides. But the team nodded along. They always did. Eric had that effect. Confident, charming, the kind of person who could rewrite history while looking you straight in the eye. The pattern started small, barely noticeable. In client meetings, Eric would interrupt my presentations with corrections that weren't corrections at all. What Lily means to say, he'd begin, then repeat exactly what I'd just said, but louder, with more authority. Clients would nod at him, scribble notes when he spoke. Sometimes they'd even thank him specifically after meetings I'd led entirely. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. We were partners, married, building something together. Credit was shared. But then came the staff meeting where I proposed expanding our social media services. I'd prepared a full presentation, market research, projected revenue. Eric listened, tapping his pen against the table. When I finished, he leaned back and sighed. I appreciate the enthusiasm, but this feels emotional rather than strategic, he said. The room went quiet. Emotional? I repeated. He smiled that patient smile, the one that made me feel small. You're passionate, which is great, but we need to think practically. 3 months later, he launched the exact same initiative and took full credit. That night at home, I made dinner while Eric poured wine. Our apartment was beautiful, the kind of place we'd dreamed about when we were dating. Exposed brick, modern kitchen, art on the walls we'd chosen together. It felt like a stage set now. You seem tense, Eric said, handing me a glass. I took it, considering my words carefully. The meeting today. You dismissed my idea in front of everyone. He laughed, actually laughed. Lily, I was protecting you. The team respects you, but they need to see leadership. Strong, decisive leadership. Not emotional reactions. There was that word again. Emotional. His favorite weapon. Any time I had an opinion, showed passion, defended myself, I was being emotional. I spent weeks on that proposal, I said quietly. Eric shrugged. And I made it better. You should be grateful I make you look credible. My fingers tightened around the wine glass. I wanted to throw it. Instead, I smiled and said something I meant with every cell in my body. One day, Eric, I won't need you. The line Eric crossed wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, calculated, the kind of betrayal that happens in bank statements rather than shouting matches. I discovered it on a Tuesday, checking our business accounts for a client payment. There was a transfer. $50,000 moved from our operating account to something labeled EV Consulting. I clicked through transaction histories. More transfers. Hundreds of thousands over 8 months, all to this mystery account. My hands went cold. I called our accountant, a woman named Patricia who'd handled our books for years. The EV Consulting account, I said, keeping my voice level. What is that? Long pause. I assumed you knew. Eric set it up last year. Said it was for contractor payments. But we didn't use contractors. I thanked Patricia and hung up. Sat there in my office, staring at numbers that didn't lie. Eric wasn't just taking credit for my work. He was stealing from our company. From me. He didn't just cross a line, I whispered to my empty office. He erased it. I confronted him that evening. Stupid, probably, but I needed to see his face, needed to hear what lie he'd construct. What's the EV Consulting account? I asked, setting my laptop between us on the kitchen counter. Eric barely glanced at it. Consulting work. Why? Consulting for who? Now he looked up, irritation flickering across his face. Clients who need additional services outside our main offerings. It's complicated, you wouldn't understand the structure. Try me. He sighed, that long-suffering sound that implied I was being difficult. Lily, this is exactly what I mean about trust. You're questioning my business decisions, creating drama over nothing. Some clients prefer separate billing. It's a tax strategy. Every word was smooth, reasonable. If I hadn't seen the numbers, I might have believed him. Show me the contracts for these clients, I said. Eric's eyes hardened. I don't have time for this. If you can't trust your own husband, we have bigger problems. Then he left. Just walked out, leaving me with my laptop and the sinking realization that he'd done this before. Lied so smoothly that reality bent around his words. The next Monday, I tried logging into my company email. Password incorrect. I reset it using my phone. Incorrect again. My stomach dropped. I walked to Eric's office, knocked once, and entered. My email's not working. Eric didn't look up from his screen. I changed your access level. You've been distracted lately, and I need to protect client confidentiality. Protect it from me? I'm co-founder. And you're also going through something, Lily. The team's noticed. I'm just covering for you until you get your head straight. My hands curled into fists. I want my access restored now. Finally, he looked at me, and his expression was almost pitying. Take a few days off. Personal time. We'll discuss this when you're calmer. 2 hours later, an email went to the entire staff. Lily is taking personal leave to address some health matters. Please direct all questions to me. I read it on my phone in the parking garage, sitting in my car, shaking with rage so pure I could taste it. Then I drove back upstairs, walked into our office, and started packing my desk. Calmly. Methodically. Smiling at everyone who asked if I was okay. That night, I sat on my couch with a flash drive and my laptop. Our apartment felt different now, like enemy territory. Eric was out, probably celebrating with colleagues who thought he'd successfully sidelined his unstable wife. I started copying files. Every client contract, every proposal I'd written, every financial report, every email chain showing my work. The strategy documents for the Ashford account. The social media expansion plan Eric had stolen. Proof of the EV consulting transfers. It took 4 hours. My eyes burned from screen glare, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Each file was ammunition. Documentation of what I'd built, what he'd taken, what he'd tried to erase. When the last file finished copying, I held the tiny drive up to the light. Proof is power, I whispered. Then I hid it inside a book on our shelf, something Eric would never touch. A romance novel my mother had given me, worn and underlined. Tomorrow, I'd take it to someone who could help me use this power. Tonight, I just needed to survive sharing a bed with a man who'd stolen my identity. The lawyer's office was nothing like I expected. Small, cluttered with case files, but the woman behind the desk radiated competence. Marissa Clark was 50-something, gray hair pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Tell me everything, she said, no pleasantries. I explained the transfers, the email lockout, the public humiliation. Showed her the flash drive contents. She reviewed it all in silence, occasionally making notes. Finally, she looked up. This is textbook financial abuse combined with professional sabotage. He's been systematically erasing your contributions while stealing from your jointly owned company. Hearing it stated so plainly made something crack in my chest. Can I fix this? Marissa leaned forward. You don't need revenge, Lily. You need leverage. And this, she tapped the flash drive, is excellent leverage. But we need to be smart. He's going to expect you to come at him emotionally. So we won't. We'll be methodical, legal, and completely calm. She outlined a strategy. Documentation, witnesses, financial audits. Let him think he's winning, she said. Arrogant people make mistakes when they feel safe. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not the naive kind, but the cold, sharp variety that comes from having a plan. Eric filed for divorce first. I came home to papers taped to our door, couldn't even be bothered to hand them to me personally. The petition claimed I'd neglected business responsibilities and demonstrated unstable behavior requiring professional help. Reading those words felt like being slapped. Not because they hurt, but because of the audacity. He was using my pain, my reaction to his abuse, as evidence that I was the problem. The court date was set for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks to prepare. I called Marissa. He filed. Good, she said calmly. Let him make the first move. Aggressive filers often overplay their hand. That night, Eric came home late, smelling like expensive whiskey. You got the papers? I was on the couch, reading. Yes. I didn't want it to come to this, but you've left me no choice. The business needs stability. I looked up at him. I agree. He blinked, clearly expecting a fight. You do? Absolutely. We should definitely resolve this in court. I'm looking forward to it. His confident expression faltered slightly. You're not going to make this difficult? I smiled. Eric, I want what's fair. Don't you? He recovered quickly, nodded. Of course. But I saw the flicker of uncertainty. Good. While Eric celebrated his upcoming freedom, I was building something new. Harper Studio. My maiden name, clean and professional. I registered it quietly, rented a small office space using money from my personal account, the one Eric didn't control. Then I started reaching out to clients. Not to steal them, not yet. Just to have conversations. I'm exploring some independent work, I'd say. Would you be open to hearing about it after my current contract obligations end? 3 said yes immediately. 2 more called me back within a week. They'd worked with me, knew my value, and Eric's recent behavior had raised questions. He seemed different in the last meeting, one client mentioned. More aggressive, less collaborative. Where were you? Personal leave, I said carefully. But I'll be available again soon. By week 3, I had 6 clients ready to follow me. Not Vaughn Creative's biggest accounts, but solid, profitable relationships I'd built personally. Eric had no idea. He was too busy spending company money on a new car, upgrading his wardrobe, strutting around like he'd already won. Let him. Arrogance makes people blind. The court date grew closer. Eric's confidence reached absurd levels. He bought a Tesla, started bringing a new assistant to company events, a young woman named Kimberly who laughed too loud at his jokes. The staff noticed. Some looked uncomfortable. Others, the ones who'd always gravitated toward power regardless of morality, played along. I watched it all from a distance, documenting everything. Photos of the Tesla. Records of company funds used for personal purchases. Witness statements from staff members who'd grown uncomfortable with Eric's behavior. Marissa was right. Arrogant people make mistakes. At a company lunch, Eric announced he was restructuring for efficiency, which meant removing my name from the website masthead. Lily's contributions are appreciated, he said, raising a glass, but it's time to acknowledge the leadership that's driven our success. I wasn't there, but 3 people sent me videos. In every frame, Eric looked triumphant, powerful. He had no idea those videos were going straight to my lawyer. No idea that every word of that speech would be played in court. No idea that the empire he thought he'd stolen was already crumbling. The networking event was downtown, one of those industry mixers where everyone pretended to enjoy warm white wine and stale crackers. Eric was there, holding court with potential clients, telling stories that painted him as a visionary. I arrived late, stood near the back, watched. He spotted me eventually, and his eyes lit up with opportunity. Lily. He called across the room. Everyone turned. I didn't know you were attending. How are you feeling? The concern in his voice was masterful, implying illness without stating it. I walked over, calm and smiling. I'm well, thanks. Just finished a proposal for the Brennan Group. The Brennan Group was one of our targets, a huge account we'd both pursued. Eric's smile tightened. We haven't landed that contract yet. Vaughn Creative hasn't, I corrected gently. Harper Studio has. His face went blank. Then red. What's Harper Studio? My firm. I should have mentioned it. We're taking on some exciting projects. I could see him calculating, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. Then his expression hardened. You can't handle that kind of pressure, Lily. Everyone here knows you're struggling. 3 people exchanged glances. The room felt smaller. Then a woman I'd worked with, Claire from the tech sector, spoke up. Actually, Lily's always been the strategic mind. I'd be interested in hearing about Harper Studio. By the end of the night, 7 people had my new business card. Eric left early, furious and flustered. Victory tasted like cheap wine and petty satisfaction. Marissa's team worked quietly in the background, setting traps Eric didn't notice. Contract amendments for ongoing projects that shifted intellectual property rights. Clauses that protected my original work. Documentation showing which strategies I'd created. Eric signed everything, too busy playing CEO to read the fine print. He thinks he's already won, Marissa explained during one of our meetings. Winners don't read carefully. The most brilliant part was the trademark filing. I'd created Vaughn Creative's logo, brand identity, entire visual language. Eric knew this but assumed it belonged to the company. What he didn't know was that I'd never formally transferred those rights. The designs were still legally mine. When Marissa filed to reclaim them, Eric would lose more than the divorce. He'd lose the company's entire brand identity. Won't he notice? I asked. Marissa smiled. Not until it's too late. These filings take weeks to process. By the time he's notified, the court hearing will be over. I sat back, watching pieces fall into place. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what I'd built, what he'd stolen, what he'd tried to erase. It was about making sure no one could do this to me again. Eric's smear campaign reached new levels of desperate. An email circulated among staff claiming I'd had a breakdown and was receiving treatment. I didn't respond directly. Instead, I updated my LinkedIn profile with a professional photo from a recent speaking event I'd done about marketing innovation. The caption was simple. Excited to announce Harper Studios' official launch. Here's to new beginnings and authentic leadership. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Former colleagues commented with support. Clients reached out. Industry contacts shared the post. Within 48 hours, it had 15,000 views. Eric called me that night, voice tight with barely controlled anger. You can't do this. Do what? Launch a competing firm. It violates our partnership agreement. I'd been waiting for this. Actually, it doesn't. I reviewed the contract. There's no non-compete clause, Eric. You never added one because you never thought I'd leave. Silence on the line. Then, this is sabotage. No, I said calmly. This is business. I'm allowed to work. Unless you're suggesting I shouldn't be employed? He hung up. 2 days later, 3 more clients switched to Harper Studio. Not because I asked them to. Because they wanted to work with someone who valued authenticity over ego. When I discovered Eric planned to present my journal in court, I felt sick. That journal contained my darkest thoughts. Moments when I'd questioned myself, wondered if I was crazy, documented the gaslighting that made me doubt reality. He'd stolen it from our bedroom, probably weeks ago, waiting for the perfect moment. Part of me wanted to stop him, file an injunction, claim privacy violation. But Marissa had a different idea. Let him do it, she said during our prep session. My head snapped up. What? That journal is evidence of psychological abuse. Every entry where you document his manipulation, his cruelty, his gaslighting. He thinks it makes you look unstable. But to a judge who understands domestic abuse patterns, it proves systematic emotional harm. I reread the journal that night, seeing it through new eyes. The entry where I wrote, Eric told me I'm too emotional to understand business. But I built this business. Why can't I trust my own judgment? The one that said, he changed my email password. Says it's for my own good. Is it? I don't know anymore. Each page wasn't weakness. It was documentation. A record of manipulation so thorough that I'd started doubting my own reality. He's bringing my story, I whispered. But I control the ending. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my new apartment, the one I'd rented 2 weeks ago, staring at shadows on the ceiling. Everything came down to tomorrow. The journal, the evidence, the flash drive contents. Marissa's strategy was solid, but courts were unpredictable. Judges were human, subject to biases and first impressions. What if Eric's performance worked? What if his charm convinced everyone that I was the problem? I got up, made tea, opened my laptop. Reread every document we were submitting. Bank statements showing the EV consulting transfers. Emails proving I'd created the strategies Eric claimed. Testimony from staff members who'd witnessed his behavior. The journal entries that documented psychological abuse. It was overwhelming, comprehensive, damning. But still, I worried. At 3 a.m, Marissa sent a text. Tomorrow, stay calm. Let the evidence speak. You've already won. I wanted to believe her. Tried to imagine walking into that courtroom with confidence, watching Eric's face when everything unraveled. Instead, I just felt exhausted. Exhausted from fighting, from documenting, from having to prove that my reality was real. Tomorrow would end it. One way or another. I just had to survive until then. The courtroom was exactly as I remembered from the preliminary hearing. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, that particular smell of old documents and anxiety. Eric arrived first, wearing his most expensive suit, flanked by his lawyer. He didn't look at me. Good. Let him stay confident. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and zero patience for nonsense. Let's begin, she said, settling into her chair. Eric's lawyer stood, launched into an opening statement about responsible business dissolution and concerning behavioral patterns. Then came the journal. Eric held it up like a prosecutor presenting murder evidence. Your Honor, these writings demonstrate a pattern of instability. Paranoid accusations, emotional volatility, inability to maintain professional relationships. He read excerpts, carefully chosen. The entries where I sounded afraid, confused, doubtful. Out of context, they painted a picture of someone unraveling. The courtroom was silent. I felt eyes on me, judging, wondering. Then Eric's lawyer finished with, we request that Ms. Harper's involvement in Vaughn Creative be dissolved, with Mr. Vaughn retaining full ownership. I watched Eric's face. Saw the triumph there. He thought he'd won. Thought the journal was his knockout punch. That's when Marissa stood up. Your Honor, Marissa said, voice clear and calm, we appreciate the defendant's presentation. Now let's discuss what he conveniently left out. She approached the bench with a tablet. These bank statements show systematic fund transfers to a private account. Over $800,000 moved without Ms. Harper's knowledge or consent, from a jointly owned company. The judge leaned forward, studying the screen. Marissa continued. These emails prove Ms. Harper created the intellectual property Mr. Vaughn claims as his own. The Ashford Hotel campaign, worth $3 million in revenue. The Brennan Group proposal. The entire social media expansion that increased company profits by 40%. She pulled up email after email. Timestamps, version histories, proof that couldn't be disputed. And this flash drive contains every document showing Ms. Harper's contributions, systematically erased from company records by Mr. Vaughn. The courtroom atmosphere shifted. Eric's lawyer shuffled papers, suddenly uncertain. I watched Eric's face drain of color. He hadn't expected this. Thought I'd been broken, scattered, too emotional to mount a real defense. The journal Mr. Vaughn presented, Marissa said quietly, doesn't show instability. It documents psychological abuse. A pattern of gaslighting so thorough that Ms. Harper questioned her own reality despite having evidence of her contributions. She paused. That's not weakness, Your Honor. That's survival. The judge reviewed documents in silence. Minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, she looked up, and her expression made Eric shrink in his chair. Mr. Vaughn, she said, voice cold, you filed documents claiming Ms. Harper neglected business responsibilities. But this evidence shows she created the majority of revenue-generating strategies while you systematically transferred funds to a private account. Eric's lawyer tried to interrupt. The judge held up one hand. You presented a private journal as evidence of instability. But those entries document a pattern of manipulation and financial abuse. Gaslighting someone until they doubt reality is psychological abuse, counselor. Are you aware of that? Silence. Furthermore, the judge continued, you've attempted to claim intellectual property you didn't create, locked the actual creator out of company systems, and conducted a public campaign to damage her professional reputation. She closed the folder with a sharp snap. This isn't a divorce dispute. This is financial fraud combined with systematic professional sabotage. Eric stood up suddenly. Your Honor, I can explain. Sit down, Mr. Vaughn. He sat. The judge looked at her notes, then at Marissa. What is Ms. Harper seeking? Full control of Vaughn Creative, including all intellectual property she created. Financial restitution for funds illegally transferred. And a restraining order preventing Mr. Vaughn from contacting her or interfering with her business operations. The judge nodded slowly. Granted. The word hung in the air. Granted. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't process. The judge continued, outlining specifics. Eric would forfeit his ownership stake in Vaughn Creative, reimburse the transferred funds with interest, and maintain zero contact with me or my business. Additionally, the judge said, I'm ordering a full audit of the EV consulting account. If additional fraud is discovered, criminal charges may follow. Eric's face was gray. His lawyer whispered urgently, but Eric just stared at the table, watching his empire collapse in real time. Ms. Harper, the judge said, and I looked up. You have full legal authority to rename and restructure the company as you see fit. All branding materials, client contracts, and intellectual property are restored to your ownership. She paused. I rarely see cases this clear-cut. What Mr. Vaughn did wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. You documented everything, presented it clearly, and remained remarkably composed throughout. That takes strength. My eyes stung. I didn't trust myself to speak, just nodded. The judge banged her gavel. This hearing is concluded. People started moving, gathering papers. I sat frozen, unable to believe it was over. Really over. Marissa touched my shoulder. You won. I looked at her. I won. Then reality hit. Not just won the case. Won everything. My company. My reputation. My future. Eric had tried to erase me, and instead, he'd erased himself. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. They'd gotten wind of the case. Corporate fraud combined with domestic abuse made good headlines. Eric tried to leave through a side exit, but they found him anyway. Mr. Vaughn, how do you respond to allegations of financial fraud? Did you really steal from your own wife? Is it true you're under criminal investigation? He pushed through, head down, lawyer running interference. I watched from the main entrance, Marissa beside me. How do you feel? She asked. Honestly? Empty. I'd spent months preparing for this moment, imagining the satisfaction. But watching Eric surrounded by reporters, seeing his life implode, I just felt tired. Then he looked back. Our eyes met across the courthouse steps. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to plead. I turned away. Walked toward my car, ignoring shouted questions. At the parking garage entrance, I heard him. Lily, please. I stopped. Turned. Eric stood alone now, lawyer gone, reporters held back by security. You can't do this to me, he said, voice breaking. We built this together. I walked back slowly, stopped 3 feet away. Close enough to see his face, far enough to stay safe. Eric, I built this. You took credit. There's a difference. It doesn't have to end like this, he tried. We could work something out. I smiled then. Not cruel, just sad. You did it to yourself, I said quietly. Then I walked away. Left him standing there while I drove toward a future he'd never be part of. Harper Studios' new office occupied the 15th floor of a building 2 blocks from our old space. Floor-to-ceiling windows, open layout, natural light everywhere. I'd spent 2 weeks designing it, choosing furniture, creating a space that felt like possibility. My team arrived on Monday morning. The 6 people from Vaughn Creative who'd jumped ship, plus 3 new hires who'd heard about the company and wanted in. We gathered in the conference room with coffee and bagels, and someone raised a cup. To the calmest boss in chaos, he said, grinning. Everyone laughed, including me. To new beginnings, I countered. We spent the day reviewing client projects, discussing strategy, planning the future. No interruptions. No one taking credit for others' work. No manipulation or gaslighting. Just people who respected each other, building something real. At 5 o'clock, most people left. I stayed, walking through the empty office, touching desks, looking at the skyline. This space was mine. Not ours. Not something I'd have to fight for or defend. Just mine. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Former tech executive faces criminal charges for corporate fraud. Below it, Eric's photo. I closed the notification without reading. His story wasn't mine to carry anymore. I'd won. Not just in court, but in life. Built something new, something better. That was the real victory. 6 months later, I stood at my office window, watching sunset paint the Chicago skyline gold and pink. Harper Studio had doubled its client base. We'd hired 10 more people. Industry publications called us innovative, authentic, a fresh voice in marketing. My phone showed 17 unread messages, mostly client requests and partnership opportunities. On my desk sat a framed photo from our company launch party. The whole team, laughing, celebrating. Real smiles, not corporate performance. No one looking over their shoulder or wondering if credit would be stolen. The journal Eric had used against me sat in my desk drawer now. Sometimes I reread entries, not with shame but with recognition. Documentation of survival. Proof that I'd trusted myself even when someone tried to make me doubt reality. He'd crossed every line. Respect, loyalty, trust, legality. Tried to erase me professionally and personally. But the one line he couldn't cross was the line I drew when I chose myself. When I stopped accepting his version of reality and started documenting my own. That's what Marissa had meant about leverage. The truth was always there. I just had to believe it enough to fight for it. I closed my laptop, grabbed my coat. The city glowed below, full of possibility. Somewhere, Eric was probably telling people his version of events, spinning himself as the victim. I didn't care anymore. His narrative wasn't my responsibility. My story, the real one, had a different ending. One where I walked away with my head high, my business thriving, my peace intact. Where I proved that calm intelligence always outlasts loud arrogance. Where justice wasn't just served. It was earned. The office lights dimmed automatically. I stood there one more moment, silhouetted against the Chicago skyline, breathing in freedom. Then I walked out, locked the door behind me, and stepped into whatever came next. On my terms. Finally.